The wild bear is a furious hunter and ought to be kept away from no matter what they have been liable for more than 180 passings lately. Albeit most of the time bear assaults are exceptionally uncommon, they will generally possibly go after when they are safeguarding food there, fledglings or domain, and would prefer to stay away from people through and through anyway. There are certain individuals who purposefully search them out and enter their region like Timothy Treadwell, otherwise known as the grizzly man. Even at a youthful age, Timothy had forever been especially partial to creatures and even had a pet squirrel when he was youngster in his puberty. He had his most memorable experience with a wild bear while concentrating on them in Gold Country, and that is the point at which he understood his actual life. Calling, he expressed that he had lost himself at school, and he had fallen into liquor addiction and medication use, almost ingesting too much heroin in the last part of the 80s. This near calamity with death spurred him to at first hunt out bears and make them his deep-rooted enthusiasm. He studied the bears for a considerable length of time. Furthermore, composed a book from his discoveries called Among Grizzlies Living with Wild Bears in Gold Country. During this time, the bears became used to his presence, and he had the option to contact them and play with their fledglings in the most natural-sounding way for him. He expressed that he had a decent connection with bears in view of common trust and regard. Following the arrival of his book, Timothy started to earn some respect for his work in TV and ecological serve. He went around the U.S. to teach nearby schools and showed up on numerous network programs to make sense of his extraordinary encounters with the creatures. He even made his own foundation with co-worker Jewel P.C. called Grizzly Individuals, with an arrangement to keep safeguarding the mountain bears in their territory. Timothy was met with contention all through his life, principally because of his obstruction with the creatures. The Public Park Administration, specifically, were exceptionally despondent and stressed with his activities, as they gave a false representation of that he was upsetting the creature's normal way of behaving, as well as putting himself at gigantic gamble. Timothy was likewise driving unapproved visits with guests to take them nearer to the creatures, something never permitted by the parks. He was believed to be crazy, as he wouldn't introduce any electric walls around his camps or convey bear shower, expressing that bears could never hurt him because of their relationship together, in spite of their apprehensions. Timothy brought no further security from the bears, and he would, before long, figure out that his relationship with these bears could undoubtedly be broken. In October 2003, Timothy and his sweetheart Amy Hugard visited Katmai Public Park in Gold Country. They were cautioned of the risks of setting up camp nearby during this season, as food was scant, and the bear were planning for winter, eating whatever they might to store for hibernation. Before long, the point of the outing was to see one of Timothy's #1 female earthy-colored bears, and needed to make sure that she was all right and prepared for the colder time of year. Amy was extremely hesitant to do this, as she was especially frightened of bears, and simply needed to return home, yet she remained as she probably was aware the way in which significant the bears were to her beau all through the excursion. The pair followed a couple of the bears, however. Timothy immediately understood that most of the bears that knew all about him had gone into hibernation. As of now, and there were various new bears, despite the fact that he was marginally awkward with the prospect of being encircled by bears that didn't know him. He actually chose to remain and camp out with Amy. On October 5th, the pair were setting up their camcorder to get some more film of the bears. The arrangement was almost finished, the camera was on and recording sound, yet the focal point cap was still set up, giving no visuals at this point. Delicate downpour sounds can be heard as Amy readies the gear from inside the tent. Unexpectedly, Amy shouts to Timothy, inquiring as to whether he's actually something else, as she can't hear him. Then the shouting starts. Timothy was shouting to Annie to escape the tent and to escape, as he was destroyed by the huge 28-year-old male bear. Amy opens the tent and started shouting at Timothy to pretend to be dead to get the bear to let him be, which appeared to be have worked for a period. Yet again, as the pair can be heard, examining whether the bear was genuinely gone at this point in this time, Amos remembered to have moved toward Timothy to keep an eye on his injuries, which were obscure as of now, yet she needed to withdraw as the bear got back to go after Timothy. Timothy starts to overreact as he understands playing dead is done going to work. He asks Amy to raise a ruckus around town with something, and she gets a skillet to smack the bear in the head. The bear relinquishes Timothy's head and on second thought nibbles into his thigh to drag him away from Amy. Canvassed in blood and realizing he gets no opportunity of endurance beyond this point, Timothy starts yelling to Amy, advising her to take off and save herself in spite of the fact that he knew an adequate number of about bears to realize he was finished for not at all like different casualties of bear assaults. He didn't go into shock during the assault and was completely mindful the whole time he was eaten alive by the creature that he cherished such a lot of. The bear was quiet beside. Irregular snarls and snorts. The main genuine sound that could be heard during this trial is the sound of Timothy frantically attempting to get away from his shouts of misery, and the dull sound of his body being hauled across the soil, away from his camp. Tragically, Amy actually didn't leave. She was frozen with dread and in shock from the sickening scene. She was at that point scared of bears and had recently seen her most dreaded fear. She was curious about the area being brought to the recreation area by Timothy and had no clue about how to return to development. On the tape, you can hear her unexpectedly start to shout. It was a shout comparative to that of an injured creature, as she understood what she had quite recently seen, as well as her circumstance. Unfortunate, her shouts just took the bear right back to her to follow through with the task, and Amy was likewise destroyed to death by a similar bear the following morning. Air taxi pilot Willie Fulton showed up at Cephea Lake to move the pair out of the area. He glanced around and figured he could see Timothy shaking a canvas to definitely stand out. However, when Willie got down on there was not reaction. He chose to climb up the way, yet immediately turned around as he felt like something wasn't correct. Once he arrived at his plane, he pivoted and saw something that made his blood turn cold through the haze. A huge, frightful-looking, earthy-colored bear was gazing at him only beside the way that he had recently followed. He immediately moved once again into his plane and set off, wanting to drive the bear away with the motor, so Timothy and Amy would have the option to go through without meeting the bear. He kept his eyes on the bear and could see him gradually eye in something. Willie orbited the camping area 15 to multiple times each time, attempting to get a superior gander at the bear and what it was eating. That is the point at which he understood that the bear was eating a human rib confine. Frightened, he called the recreation area officers and requested that they come and study the region, as he accepted something had happened to the pair. A gathering of officers showed up and started to follow up to the campground, with Willie directing them. They spotted several bears on their way up. However, as the bears overlooked them, they went on without an issue. Unexpectedly, one of the officers yelled, "Bear," making the others aware of the creature. Around 20 F2 away, they started yelling at the bear, trying to drive it away. However, it before long turned out to be certain that it realized they were there, was not compromised, and was effectively following them. They all started taking shots at the bear, discharging a sum of 21 shots between the three officers. They didn't quit shooting until the bear was shot dead. They proceeded to the camping area, where they found Timothy and Amy's two tents fell and torn, with an enormous mud heap at the front of the entry. The officers shifted a portion of the mud to the side and tracked down Amy's body with her fingers. Pushing through the soil, she had been covered by the bear, prepared for winter. When they shifted the remainder of the mud to the side, she looked like she was calmly dozing, with the exception of the unmistakable truth that she had been, on the whole, eaten by the bear. They were still up in the air to track down Timothy, albeit the expectations of him being alive were blurring quick. They brushed the close-by region and found pieces of him spread everything around the woodland. His head was seen as connected to a piece of his spine, with a terrible frown all over catching the aggravation, in which he kicked the bucket. His right arm and hand were likewise found lying close by his watch. Actually joined it was a grisly scene, to find as the officers were finding the bodies one more modest bear endeavored to move toward them. He was roughly 3 years of age and was following the group from 30 FDO, way clarifying that he would proceed to approach and endeavor to go after them. He was quickly shot by the officers, who would have rather not taken any risks given the circumstance they were in. Once Timothy and Amy's bodies had been separated from the recreation area, the officers sent the carcasses of the enormous bear to be researched. A necropsy was directed, and it was found that the bear had human remaining parts and apparel inside its stomach. Presuming that this was the bear that had killed and eaten the couple, the more youthful bear had proactively been ripped apart by different bears, so we won't ever be aware, assuming it had a say in Timothy and Amy's demises. At last, it's memorables essential to regard wild creatures and give them enough space regardless of whether bonds are framed with them. Creatures no one can tell what could occur or what else may be waiting in the timberland, hanging tight for the opportunity to carry you to your shocking last difficulty. Sweetheart and Sweetheart, Roy Stoddard and Tamara Mallister, were two 24-year-olds who met while showing in similar school in West Malibu, California. They at first reinforced over their sense for experience. Tamara was planning for general well-being work in Kenya. As a component of her graduate degree, Roy diverted his hand to anything from hiking, trekking, and surfing to scuba plunging and kaying. Both of them invested all their extra energy climbing, setting up camp, and kaying together on Thursday, January 26, the 1989. The couple were preparing for a marathon that they were anticipating contending in together. In anticipation of the impending race, they kayaked and swam day to day. Their standard course went on them on a 3M round outing from Latigo highlight Heaven Bay. They each took a solitary man kayak into the water. On that devoted day, they made a beeline for the water not long before 9:00 Stopping on the sand, the two of them plunked down and partook in a hot mug of espresso and a biscuit to launch their day. A bystander saw them send off at 9:30 before they rowed northwards around Latigo Point and on towards Heaven Bay. It was like any of their other preparation days. The couple were blissful and eager to hang out. The breeze was light and the oceans were genuinely quiet as they rowed into the ocean. That day they were at no point ever to return in the future. There could have been not further sightings of the couple alive. Tamara's body was found 2 days after the fact. This story depends on the discoveries and resulting report by the case examiner Ralph Collier. Coming up next is one of the quantity of potential outcomes that might have happened to the couple and depends on conditional proof. Subsequent to completing their espresso, they put on their coats and zipped them up over their bathing suits. These were blue and dark wetsuit-style coats that kept them warm on the vast water. As the breeze was getting, there was a chill in the air. The couple rowed to around 100 yards out, leftover shoreside of the kelp beds. They realized it was more secure not to paddle past the kelp backwoods, as generally they go about as a characteristic impediment to sharks. Subsequent to heading around Latigo Point, the breeze struck them. It whipped the outer layer of the ocean, the salt splash wetting their countenances and stinging their eyes. They bowed their heads against it, diving in and persisting. The preparation course normally took them 45 minutes to an hour, relying upon how long they halted for a dip at the midpoint. Today, it was taking them a piece longer. They lashed their kayaks together as Tamara was being passed over course. The second delay in rowing gave them a breather and some respite. They chose to proceed with Roy gained ground in the number 1 spot kayak, slicing conscious for Tamara to follow. He felt the pulling of the rope occasionally as it went tight, pulling Tamara back on course. It wasn't well before they could see their midway objective, Heaven Bay. Yet they never made it. Unexpectedly, without advance notice, there was a huge crush from underneath. The water, something from the profundities, obliterated upwards and struck. The boats from under both of them were tossed from their kayaks and banged into the ocean. Tamara re-emerged hacking and faltering, uncertain of what had simply happened. Seconds after the fact, she felt a huge pull to her left side thigh and was pulled submerged, kicking and flailing wildly. She frantically attempted to pull herself to the surface. However, a shark had major areas of strength. For an of her leg, she could feel her lungs going to burst as the shark wandered aimlessly submerged. Roy had thumped his head on his kayak when he had been tossed into the sea, shocked and unsteady. He wildly squinted, attempting to figure out the circumstance. Seconds after the fact, he heard the frightened shouts of his better half. As she quickly re-emerged, he wheeled around to see an ocean of red and their improved kayaks weaving in the water. He promptly swam over to the uproar and figured out how to get Tamara's hand, pulling her over the outer layer of the water. She wheezed for breath. He clutched her frantically to pull her to the boats. The openings of the kayaks were wet and dangerous. Each time he attempted to snatch on, his hand would slip. He lifted one side, attempting to flip it back over. However, the weight was enormous, and while clutching Tamara with one arm, he didn't have the solidarity to compose the boat. He attempted over and over. The disturbance in the water was seen by Margaret Sprout as she watched out of her front room windows at 10:15 that morning. She saw a mind-blowing bubbling of the water and flailing uncontrollably. It was out past the kelp beds, close to a huge U.S. Coast Gatekeeper float. She recognized various seals jump out of the water onto the outer layer of the float, staying away from the beating ocean. They were restless and unsettled. It is muddled whether this disturbance was a shark going after one of the seals, or whether it was the genuine assault on Tamara and Roy on the off chance that it was the previous and had fruitlessly gotten a seal. A similar shark might certainly stand out enough to be noticed to the kayaks. A couple of seconds after the fact, as Roy clutched Tamara, keeping her above water, he could feel her getting away. The shark had cut off her femoral course, and she was draining out. Yet the shark hadn't gotten done at this point. It returned, and in a mad assault, it grabbed hold of Roy and hauled him submerged, gone forever. When the couple didn't appear for work the following day, their companions and partners raised the caution. Individuals realized that Tamara and Roy had taken the kayaks out and they knew their normal lore. The kayaks were found the day after the assault. They were drifting and improved under 20 mi from where the couple had rowed on the contrary side of Nick Monica Nakamakane. Rows the kayaks had stress breaks along their openings, and one had an opening in the bow. On assessment of this proof, a designer recommended that huge effect and power would cause this sort of harm. The item that struck the kayaks expected to have been more than 2,000 lb or 900 kg and going no less than 17 bunches. These are qualities of an extraordinary white shark. These staggering dominant hunters are likewise known to go after their prey from behind or from under, frequently shooting out of the water as they do so. The next day, the team of a cruising boat found Tamara's body drifting in the water. The ebb and flow had conveyed her 30 m north of Heaven Bay, close to Channel Islands Harbor. She was all the while wearing her coat, which proposes that she wasn't swimming when she was gone. After her wounds included profound nibble wounds to her upper thighs. One had cut off her femoral supply route and vein, and the other estimated in excess of 34 cm or 13 in distance. Across she had swelling to her hand and head, perhaps from being tossed from her kayak. From the size of the indentations and seriousness of the wounds, it was reasoned that an incredible white shark, estimating something like 5 ft long, had been the reason for the casualty. Following the revelation of Tamara's body, the U.S. Coast Gatekeeper directed a pursuit and salvage activity by both boat and helicopter to attempt to find Roy. Following 7 days in length search, no hint of him was at any point found. This staggering assault occurred inside sight of the shore, but nobody saw it. The youthful couple were both fit and brave despite the fact that Tamara was new to Kane Roy, had been on the water since adolescence, and both were outstanding swimmers. Their lives were stopped, unfortunately basically doing what they adored, while the sea and its seashores give us a portion of nature's most noteworthy jungle gyms. We should recall that this is the shark's environment, not our own, and in spite of how experienced and set you up, maybe one experience with these deadly animals can lead you to your lamentable last difficulty. This story simply demonstrates that creature assaults can end up night, the most experienced and wary climbers and campers. The misfortune happened in September 2023 and shook the occupants of the region of Alberta. Doe Inglis, matured 62, and Jenny Goosey likewise, 62, had been together since college. They lived in Lethbridge, Alberta, Canada. They were indistinguishable, both functioning as experts in similar logical lab. They had a profound love for the incomparable open air and were positively no outsider to the difficulties that it can some of the time present. They each conveyed with them essential endurance units and crisis gear each time they wandered into the wild they headed out to be. Public park 2 times every year, normally once in the spring and once in the fall. Yet the public park is home to probably the deadliest hunters in Canada Mountain. Bears there are believed to be 65 people that call boycott home, with a further 20 to 40 wild bears. To a relative said that Doe and Jenny were exceptionally cautious individuals when they were on their undertakings in the wild. Whether it be climbing, setting up camp, kayaking, or whitewater boating, they knew exposed convention, and they followed it to a T. However, some of the time, with even awesome safety measures set up, individuals can wind up in an unlucky spot. The pair had with them their companion and climbing friend, their canine. Them 3 adhered to signposted courses and consistently stuck to any admonitions showed all through the recreation area. Yet, on that critical excursion in late September 2023, there were no admonitions, no bears had been referred to around there, and there had been no reports of them from guests. They were on day 5 of 7 days in length visit to the recreation area, something they anticipate consistently. They were advancing along Red Deer Stream Valley, west of Yaha Tinder Farm. This valley is an immaculate scene inside the recreation area. It is blocked off to most tigers, without any streets driving in or out of it. Glades give method for developing tidy woodlands, and overshadowing the valley floor are rough mountain ridges and cold suurs. The region is home to some entrancing, untamed life, including elk, moose, wolves, wild bears, and cougars. The scene is absolutely staggering, yet its distance isn't for weak-willed, and it has its risks. After the 5th day's climbing, the couple tracked down a spot to camp for the night. They hadn't come to the arranged setting up camp spot, yet needed to set up before it got dull. They realized bears represented a genuine danger and didn't have any desire to run into one as the sun set. It was a reasonable choice, had the opportunity to set up their tent and cook supper before night fell. As them 3 settled around the pit fire, Doe sent a warning message involving their piece of clothing in reach to his uncle Colin Inglis. The message said, "They hadn't made the arranged camping area, yet we're camping out now." The message pinged through at 5:00 p.m. It was the consolation their family required, and it was one more well-being safety measure the careful couple took while climbing in the backwoods. They checked in with family 2 times consistently. However, what the couple didn't know was that there was a mountain bear lurking in the shadows. That night, as the weather conditions gets colder, bears enter a hyperphagic state in which they canyon themselves on as much food as conceivable before the colder time of year. It's fundamental for them to pack in the calories and pack on the pounds they need to endure the long, chilly, dull, cold weather months. The whole way through to springtime, something made the bear aware of their presence. Maybe it was their fragrance, the smell of their supper, or the ringing of pots and skillet. As they cleaned up their supper, anything happened, their bear came for them. The couple, being capable campers and bear-wise had balanced up their food in a close-by tree so as not to draw in bears. Into their tent, they likewise kept with them a container of bear splash, each after supper dough, and Jenny crept into their tent with their canine as night fell and dimness overwhelmed B Public Park. Both of them sat up, perusing on their tablets something they did consistently prior to settling down. However, outside a mountain bear was moving toward the tent. They could hear it sniffing only the opposite side of the material. They remained still and as calm as conceivable, scarcely considering. Breathing then frighteningly, it cut through the material and attempted to get the couple inside. The canine snarled and yelped, and Doe and Jenny attempted to frighten it off. Shouting at it, Doe went after his bear shower and voided the canister at the bear. However, in a wrath, the bear retaliated. No one knows precisely exact thing occurred during those sickening minutes yet. One of them sent a SOS message from the Garmin, which Doe's uncle got it. Said bear assault terrible. So last Monday they began, and Monday night, like all other times, I would by the day's end, I would get an in-reach message expressing we're at our objective. All is well. On Friday night, same thing. At U4:52, I received a message saying we're postponed. However, all is great, and that message would imply that they were in a camp. Their camp was set up. They were likely making super, and they were informing myself and Jenny's mother with that message to say that things were great. 8:15, the telephone rings. I got a call from Garmin, who in reach has a place with, and the message was we've had a SOS message, and the SOS besides the fact that the SOS enacted was, which was a will be a button. However, there was a message input into the arrive at that said bear assault terrible. So by then we realized something was going on that was extremely terrible, that they were in a difficult situation. The pain message likewise quickly cautioned an untamed life human assault reaction group. This crisis GPS gadget was one more piece of hardware the good-to-go couple generally conveyed with them. It was possibly a daily existence-saving gadget. The reaction group were sent promptly. The utilization of a chopper was not feasible because of unfortunate climate and unfortunate perceivability. This was a significant blow. The salvage group realized that following a bear assault consistently counts, and presently they had to make the excursion by walking. They were uniquely prepared people with mountaineering and clinical preparation explicitly to take care of creature assault casualties. Walking through the Canadian wild, they didn't have the foggiest idea what they planned to find at the area. No one knew whether the casualties were in any condition. They needed to navigate the precarious rough landscape at a horrendous hour. Their spotlights enlightening the manner in which they realized they were strolling into peril. They realized that a bear was out there, but they needed to continue onward to attempt to arrive at the couple in urgent need at 1:00 in the first part of the day, 5 hours after they got the pain signal. The heroes showed up at the couple's camp. The scene they showed up at was troubling. They could see indications of a battle, and unfortunately, they could see 3 dead bodies, those of Doe and Jenny, and that of their canine. The mountain bear had rampaged through the camp, obliterating everybody in it. There, 3 of them lay on the ground outside the tent. As they explored around the camping area, they attempted to sort out what had happened. The food was as yet hung up in the trees, and lying on the ground were 2 jars of bear splash. They were unfilled. The tent was leveled and destroyed. The 2 tablets were inside with their screens crushed. There were indications of a battle that didn't happen in only one spot. There was proof that the couple attempted to drive the bear off. However, none of their readiness and none of their panic strategies worked except for them. Salvage group was in good company. They were being watched by a similar grizzly. It stood just yards away, secret by the trees. As they explored the scene, they out of nowhere heard a crashing through the undergrowth, blowing some people's minds and twirling their electric lamps around. They saw a wild bear rising up out of the trees. enlightened by their spotlight, radiates it ran into the clearing. It won't stop. This was definitely not a counterfeit charge. They just had one operation choice: pulling the trigger on a rifle. One of the salvage group shot the bear. It tumbled to the ground. Only feet from where they stood, Imperial Canadian Mounted Police showed up at the scene at 5:00 that morning. They painstakingly diverted the people in question and sent the bear off for a necropsy. The examination concerning the bear-all uncovered that she was a 25-year-old female. She wasn't lactating at that point and wasn't labeled or referred to the recreation area officers as an irritation bear. She was in genuinely great shape, however, with unfortunate teeth and not exactly typical muscle versus fee. For that season, her way of behaving had been extremely forceful in the event that a bear has gone after an individual because of guard from being surprised. Then it ordinarily leaves the region subsequently. However, this bear stayed close by. Might this bear at any point have been hunting the two explorers? Was this a savage assault? Assaults by bears in Canada are uncommon, and ruthless goes after really interesting. With only 65 grizzlies in the recreation area, the latest lethal assault happened in 1973 when a vigorously calmed bear charged at a researcher as it was being migrated and delivered. Obviously, this misfortune has hit Doe and Jenny's loved ones hard. It is challenging to understand precisely what has occurred and the succession of occasions that hinted at their demises. The people who realize the couple are in a province of shock, and for it to have happened to such an encounter, 2 or 3 implies that it can happen to anybody, even subsequent to sending 2 jars of bear shower onto the bear. It wasn't sufficient to stop the couple's frightening lust.